Naphtali. But the people that walked in darkness will see a great light. And the light will dawn. And God has enlarged the nation, increased their joy. They rejoice over you. People rejoice at harvest time. For as in Midian's defeat, in the day of Midian, where they just stood still and broke the pitcher and said, the sword of Gideon and of the Lord. And they broke out in the camp in the middle of the night and started pointing things out to each other. You'll get it later on. But at any rate, there. And every warrior's boot used in battle, every garment rolled up in blood, all GI issue, gone. It'll be used for fuel in the fire. Why? For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given, and he shall rule and reign forever and ever and ever and ever. And I'm stuck again. And ever. And that word just keeps on going there. But what a title. Wonderful Counselor, Almighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Who is this? Mashiach. Messiah. He is the one here. Well, that's much too short, but that begins a number of these. Oh, I've got to give you another one. Isaiah 24. They say that this whole business of the pre-millennial, now careful, I didn't say pre-tribulational. I'm now talking of millennium. Millennium is the word for 1,000. It's a chiliastic view, another word for 1,000-year reign. But in Isaiah 24, verse 21, in that day, the Lord will punish the powers of heavens above and the kings of the earth beneath. They'll be herded together like prisoners bound in a dungeon, and they'll be shut up in a prison. And they will be punished after many days. How many days? He doesn't say. But Revelation 20 does. 1,000 days. No, 1,000 years. 1,000 years. The moon will be abashed. The sun ashamed. That sounds like Joel. For Adonai of hosts will reign on Mount Zion and in Jerusalem, and before its elders gloriously. Gloriously. Satan will be bound and put in prison until the end of the millennium. This is a parallel. Everyone says, why would you make a doctrine only on one verse, one chapter? You don't. This is another chapter, and this is only one of many. 5 Presbyterian pastors at the turn of the 20th century, 1900, 1905, wrote books. One is called Nathaniel West, one of the 5, who believed in the future restoration of Israel back to the land and of 1,000-year rule and reign with Messiah here on the earth. Honestly. And he gives in 300 and some pages prophecy after prophecy, which is like Revelation 20 in the Old Testament, in the Tanakh. Nathaniel West. So that's it. And before we take a break, I've got to tell you another one. Look, I think this is happening before our eyes. I went out with Joel Rosenberg to Biola. My former dean of the faculty, Barry Corey, is now president there. 2 weeks from now, I'm going to be ministering with him in Cannon Beach, Oregon. But Barry applied for the presidency and was runner-up to succeed me. They didn't take him. I should have worked harder to get him in there. But he found out Biola and Talbot Seminary, needed a president. And so he called me. He said, "Walt, do you think I should apply?" I said, "How many are applying?" He said, 150. And I said, "They have their stuff in already?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Hurry up, do it." He said, "Well, it's a long form. 25 pages on my doctrinal statement." So it was detailed. And he was made president. He really was. They called me, the committee, and they said, "What do you think?" He was 41 years of age. So they said, "What do you think about Barry as president of Biola?" I said, "No, I don't think it's a good idea." They said, "Why?" Well, I said, he has 3 children, and one of them is his youngest boy, Samuel, about the same age as my granddaughter. They're both about 3-4 years old. And I saw them out at Gordon Conwell sit on a step, and they ran their fingers through each other's curly hair. And then I saw my granddaughter lean over and kiss him. So I think they're meant for each other. And if you take him to California, I don't see how this can happen. And quick as a flash, he said, "Don't you know, absence makes the heart grow fonder." He came right back. So he was made president. Barry invited me out to come out for the installation dinner, and would I speak? But I said, "Yes, I have the date open." He said, "Well, I've got some requirements." First of all, he said, "You're not going to say that's King James. I was raised on King James, so I'm bilingual." I said, "I might." He said, "Don't say that." I said, "Why?" He said, "Look, I got some others here too. Don't say I'm not a prophet or a son of a prophet. My father wasn't a prophet, so I'm not a son of a prophet. And I've worked for nonprofit organizations all my life." He said, "Don't say that either." And so he went through a half dozen of these. I said, "Why, Barry?" He said, "Walt, I don't want the faculty and students here to get the idea you're copying me." But there at the conference in March, I did chapter 19, the prophecy of Egypt, Isaiah. Let me look at it with you just here, because if there is anything that's contemporary on the scene right now, you've got chapters 13 through 23 are prophecies to the nations, which is repeated in let me see, Jeremiah 45 to 51, which is repeated in Ezekiel 25 to 32, 25 chapters, 690 verses, of which I've never heard anyone preach anything on those verses more than in all of Paul's prison epistles and some. I mean, it is huge. But an oracle concerning Egypt, 19 of Isaiah, 19. And he sees the idols trembling because the wind is blowing them. At least they're showing some recognition. Finally, the hearts of the Egyptians begin to melt. So finally, the Egyptians get it. What's wrong? Verses 2 and 4, there comes a great civil war. Kingdom against kingdom, neighbor against neighbor, city against city. The Egyptians will lose heart. They'll consult idol spirits of the dead, medium spiritists, but I'll hand over the Egyptians to the power of a cruel master. What do you think about the recent election?
That sounds like the headline.
I think it fits. Next one, 5 through 10. Now it's economic. 1970, they built what? Aswan Dam. Yeah. Prior to that, every year, unless it was a drought, that Nile flooded over the whole land and put millions of tons of new soil and watered the land. But now, with the Aswan Dam, it's backed up Lake Nasser 500 miles. 500 miles. It's like New York City past Cleveland with the Lake Nasser. And it will never fill up. The winds are blowing across there, desiccating the water, and millions of tons of mud are filling the thing up. Filling up behind the dam. And that dam is a huge rock-filled dam which took 35,000 men almost 10 years to build. Huge, huge. So the waters of the river will dry up. The riverbeds will be parched and dry. The canals will stink. The streams of Egypt will dwindle and dry up. Oh yeah. The streams that are off on the side are not cleansed every year. So what's happening? He goes on talking about schistomiasis. A disease gets into the skin. 1 out of every 10 Egyptians are afflicted with it. It can cause death. Can cause death. And the fishermen groan, all of the Mediterranean Sea with its salt water backs into the fresh water and knocked off the sardine industry, which was one of the 3 exports of that day. Then a third disaster, and that's an educational, intellectual one, verses 11. The officials of Zoan are nothing but fools. Wise counselors of Pharaoh give senseless advice. How can you say to Pharaoh, I'm one of the wise men? Where are your wise men now? Let them show you and make known what the Lord Almighty has planned. The officials of Zoan have become fools. The leaders of Memphis are deceived. What was the gift God gave to that nation? Wisdom. How do I know? When God gave wisdom to Solomon, he was wiser than the men of the east, B'nai Kedem, and wiser than the men of Mitzrayim, Egypt. Mitzrayim. Wiser? Wiser? But they're not wise here. Now, what takes place is a bridge. And the bridge is in verses 14 and 15. The Lord's poured out on them a spirit of dizziness. He'll make Egypt stagger in all that she does as a drunkard. There's nothing Egypt can do, head or tail, palm branch, or reed. Although I must tell you, the gospel's having a great day. A great day. Across the street from the first mosque, remember, Egypt was a Christian nation up until the 600s AD. They built the mosque, and across the street is the cemetery where the garbage collectors of, what's the city there? Cairo, live and worship on Sunday in caves that are back in the mountain. 50,000 worshipers worship the Lord. And he says in 16, in that day the Egyptians will be like women. They'll shudder with fear at the uplifted hand of the Lord Almighty. And secondly, the land of Judah will bring terror to the Egyptians. Are you kidding? That never happened. Never until the 6-Day War. They flew out low under the radar, banked over Libya, and came in, and all their guns, like World War I, were in placements fixed over to the east. And here they're going right over their heads. And that was a fast war. We were saying we needed to kidnap Moshe Dayan and get us out of Vietnam. That was it. And all kinds of jokes in those days there. Ralph Nader, it was said, he was going to get after the Egyptians for not having safety backup lights on their tanks. Things that sort there, and so forth. But look what takes place here. In that day, he does it 6 times. In that day, in that day, in that day, in that day. In verse 18, in that day. Verse 19, in that day. Middle of verse 21, in that day. Verse 23, in that day. In verse 24, in that, what day? The day in which the Lord moves dramatically. And what's going to happen? Well, verse 18, 5 cities in Egypt will speak the language of Canaan. Speak Hebrew and swear allegiance to Adonai of hosts. I didn't say it, this text says it. A revival. Secondly, there'll be an altar in the heart, verse 19, of Egypt, and a monument at its border, like the Statue of Liberty, to remember the great day in which revival came to Egypt. It says so here. So it's going to be on the list of things you got to see. Beside the pyramids of Giza, you've got to stop and see this monument. And he says also in verse 20, I'm going to send them, a cruel master, but a savior and a defender will rescue them, just like the book of Judges. And 21, the Lord will make himself known to the Egyptians, and in that day they'll acknowledge the Lord. They will worship with sacrifices and grain offerings and make vows to Adonai and keep them. Then 22, Adonai will strike them with a plague, but he will heal them too. He will heal them. And will turn to Adonai, and he'll respond to their pleas. Now, if you think now get ready for this. This is really the mind buster. Here it goes. In verse 23, and in that day there'll be a highway from Egypt to Assyria. Are you kidding? From Egypt through Israel to Iraq. Northern Iraq. Assyria is where the Kurds are right now. And the Iraqis will go to Egypt and the Egyptians to Iraq. And the Egyptians and the Iraqis will worship together. Huh? And verse 24, and in that day, Israel will be third along with Egypt, Mitzrayim, and Assyria. A blessing in the earth. Are you kidding? A blessing in the earth. It's how to get the whole world upset right now. But Adonai of hosts will bless them, saying, blessed be Egypt, my people. No. Israel, my people. My people belongs to Israel. Israel, he says Egypt. And Assyria, my handiwork. No. That's used of Israel, my handiwork. And Israel, my inheritance. I think we're sitting for that. The last election did not go off well. The wrong guy won just by a little bit, 51%. And they're claiming they're going to go back to the square again, and it's just going to be mayhem. But what's God doing? What's this whole Arab Spring thing about? Check it out. Now, you may not think so, but remember, when this happens, you heard it here first. Oh, my. Comments or questions before we take a break? Yes?
Going back to the text, breaking out, the violent breaking out.
Yeah. And Micah 2.
Correct. That seems to be in direct connection with where Yeshua says the kingdom suffers violence and suffers violence and is taken by force. And I've heard teaching that breaking out of that wall, out of that sheep pen type thing, it's a violent thing to break out.
Well, if you've ever seen, I've been around the farm where you have these animals in and you open up the gate, look out, step aside because they're coming out. And they just come out massively. But here, Messiah leads them. So, interesting comment. Yes, back here, thanks.
So,
I'm not getting all of it there. Jeff, you translate?
When Abraham sacrificed his son, was the order was the instruction for him to sacrifice his son a violation of God's law, or was it just that God told Moses he knew he wasn't going to actually follow through?
It is true that in the later law, sacrificing humans is disallowed. But be careful. Because we have Messiah himself offering himself and God's Son, who is truly human as well as truly divine. So there is, and anyway, the text warns us in the first verse, the following is a test. The following is a test. In the event of a real sacrifice, you would be told to turn to. But no, and wouldn't it have been wonderful if Abraham would have known, son, this is only a test. God's testing us. He didn't know that. So it was a real test there, and therefore God had no intentions of going through. But, I need to show respect for your question. There are aspects that you're asking me there that are harder than I can really get into there. Yeah, Rex wants to get in on this.
I was just wanting to clarify what she was asking there a little bit.
Yeah.
She was wanting you to compare, she was wanting you to compare if, I knew who it was. If Hosea did not marry, or if he did not command Hosea to marry an actual harlot at the time,
That's what I argued, that Gomer was pure at the time, and only after she bore 3 children did she go wild.
but she was asking a question about that in light of
whether
Abraham.
God, right, then the argument is whether God cannot order something that he's against, which I think you mentioned, which is he could not.
Oh, you're putting the two together.
To marry, right.
Yeah.
Right, he could command Abraham to that. Is that the reason because it was before the law with Abraham and Hosea was after the law, or because it was a test for Abraham and God knew that it was going to happen?
Yeah, I could see how you could argue that way, but I think I would caution you about the death of Yeshua, which also involves some of the same principles here. So that's why I'm holding back and saying there is something you and I are not feeding into the equation. But I still think in the case of the command about marriage from Genesis 2, it was that a man and a woman should join and become one flesh, and that should not have been violated, and was true even before God gave the Decalogue. For example, Joseph says in Genesis 37, when the Potiphar's wife said, "Come to bed with me. How can I do this great sin against my master and against God?" And there is no Decalogue yet. Matter of fact, in Bereshit, every one of the Decalogue is already illustrated before we have them in Shemot, chapter 20. Yeah, quit comment here.
Yeah, the whole thing I think that's so beautiful about Hosea is that Hosea is pure, and he gave his life to be a prophet to the Israelites, but especially to Ephraim, the lost 10 tribes that were going away from all the commandments, but God, in showing his love to Israel and saying, please come back to me, I want to show you how I love you by this prophet marrying, and it says in verse 2, to marry a wife of whoredoms and children of whoredoms, for the land hath committed great whoredoms, departing from the Lord. So in that act of him marrying the whoredoms, just to show Israel how much he loves them and wants them to come back to be obedient, by this doing such a weird thing.
I hear you, and your argument is strong, but we don't know how much time is involved. God did tell him, go